Here is your story, 3,000 words, clean language, no headings, no part labels. Just the story. Ilara Voss learned early that the best way to move through a powerful man's house was to become part of the walls. Not invisible, exactly. Walls are noticed, when they crack, when they leak, when the paint begins to peel. But they are not looked at. Not really. They are simply there, holding everything up, and nobody thinks to say thank you to a wall. She had been at Ashgrove Estate for 41 days when she understood that the Duke did not know her name. This was not a guess. She knew because on the 41st day, his personal secretary, a thin man named Mr. Price, who always smelled faintly of printer ink, referred to her in front of the Duke as the household manager, and the Duke had nodded and said, "Yes, good," without any flicker of correction. Without any flicker of anything. He had looked straight through her the way light passes through glass, finding nothing on the other side worth stopping for. She had gone to the linen closet that evening and counted the tablecloths. 38. All correct. All pressed. All folded to exactly the same width because she had trained the junior staff to use a cardboard template she cut herself. Counting helped. It always had. Ashgrove was a beautiful estate, the kind that appeared in travel magazines beside words like storied and magnificent, and photographs that made the stone look golden. In reality the stone was gray, as stone tends to be, but there was a particular hour in the late afternoon when the light came sideways through the upper windows of the east wing and turned everything the color of old honey, and during that hour Ilara sometimes forgot that she had chosen to be there and simply let herself belong to it for a moment. Then the hour passed, and she went back to work. Her work was the kind that lives in the gap between what is expected and what is noticed. She maintained the flowers on the third-floor landing, white peonies, replaced every 4 days before they could turn. She ensured the Duke's preferred pen, a particular black fountain pen with a worn grip, was always on the right side of his desk blotter and never the left. She coordinated the kitchen staff so that dinner arrived at 7:15 on the nose, because 7:30 made him tired and 7 o'clock, she had learned, made him feel managed, and a Duke who felt managed became a Duke who made everyone's life considerably more difficult. She had never been told any of this. She had figured it out. That was also part of the work. In 6 weeks, the Duke had spoken to her directly on 4 occasions. The first was during her initial walkthrough of the estate, when he had asked whether she had experience managing formal households. She had said yes. This was accurate. The second occasion, he informed her that her predecessor had overseasoned the Sunday roast and he would not tolerate a repetition. The third was a request to have the East Wing aired before a visiting colleague arrived. The fourth was a brief, distracted comment that the garden gate stuck and someone ought to see to it. On none of these occasions had he asked her name. She had not offered it. The thing about Ilara Voss was that she had not always counted linens in other people's houses. There was a version of her life, the one that had been planned, that had been fully furnished and prepared the way a good room is prepared, in which she would have been on the other side of all of this. Sitting at the table, not setting it. Handing a coat to someone, not taking it. The Voss family had been bankers. Not the aggressive, modern kind, but the old kind, the kind with oak-paneled offices and handshake agreements and a name that meant something in 3 countries. Her grandfather had built it. Her father had sustained it. Her father's business partner had dismantled it in 14 months through decisions that were either catastrophically stupid or brilliantly criminal, and a court was still determining which. The estate, the real Voss estate, a property in the countryside that her grandmother had filled with peonies and good furniture and one very cracked diamond tiara, was frozen in legal proceedings. Probate. A word that had come to feel, to Ilara, like a locked door she could see through but not open. So she waited. And while she waited, she worked. She had chosen Ashgrove specifically. Not because she needed employment, though she did, she had chosen it because the legal resolution of her family's estate required the signature of one particular trustee, and that trustee was a man named Lord Cavell, who happened to be the Duke of Ashgrove's closest friend and most frequent dinner guest. She was not here to manipulate anyone. She was not running any scheme. She simply needed to be near the right room when the right moment came, and she had learned that the people who control access to rooms are almost never the ones whose names are on the deeds. The gala was announced on a Tuesday. It was a formal notification, distributed by Mr. Price in printed memos with the estate's crest at the top, the annual Ashgrove Charity Gala, to be held on the last Saturday of the month, mandatory attendance for all titled families within 3 counties, catering for 240 guests, carriages at midnight. Ilara received the operational brief. 12 pages. Catering logistics, floral arrangements, valet coordination, accommodation for 6 overnight guests, wine service timing, dietary requirements, emergency contact numbers for 4 different vendors. Her name appeared nowhere on the guest list. She read through the brief twice, made 3 notes in the margin, and went to speak with the florist. The flowers she chose were white, mostly, white roses, white ranunculus, white orchids at the formal tables. But for the centerpiece arrangements, she requested peonies. A specific variety, pale at the center and deepening to cream at the edges, with a particular fullness that made them look almost architectural. The florist raised an eyebrow. "These are vase peonies," he said, not unkindly. "Named after the family that cultivated them. Rare now. The family went under." "I know," Ilara said. "They're still the right flower for the room." The florist agreed that they were. 3 days before the gala, the Duke passed through the main hall while she was reviewing the final centerpiece placement. He paused. She did not look up immediately. She had learned that looking up immediately made men think you had been waiting for them. She adjusted 2 stems, then met his eyes. He glanced at the flowers. Then at her. His expression did not change. He walked on. She moved the stems back to where they had been. They had been correct the first time. 2 days before the gala, she was cross-referencing the RSVPs against the seating chart when she found the name. Countess Helene Voss-Marin. Her mother's cousin. Attending. Confirmed. Ilara looked at the name for a moment that was exactly 4 seconds longer than a household manager needed to look at any name on any guest list. Then she went to the linen closet and counted the tablecloths. 38. All correct. She stayed for a while. The night before the gala, she opened the small locked case under her bed. She kept it padlocked, not because anyone in the staff quarters would touch it, but because the lock made her feel like it was still hers. Like things that need protecting are things that still exist. Inside the case was a gown. Ivory silk, structured at the bodice, with a skirt that moved the way old silk moves, heavily, slowly, with intention. It had been made for her grandmother in the year her grandmother turned 25, by a tailor whose name was now in history books for reasons that had nothing to do with clothes but who had made, in that particular year, the finest formal gown in the region. Her grandmother had given it to Ilara's mother, who had kept it wrapped in tissue paper for 30 years without wearing it because she said it was not her dress, it was the family's dress, and the family would find the right moment for it. Ilara was deciding that this was the moment. Below the gown, in a velvet pouch, was the tiara. 17 diamonds. One cracked, the third from the left, cracked during a journey she had never been given the full story of, and never repaired because her grandmother said a repaired crack is a lie and she preferred honest things. The setting was white gold, slightly darkened at the edges the way old metal darkens, the way real things age, nothing like the bright, eager shine of a replica. Ilara held it for a moment. Then she put it back. Closed the case. Locked it. She counted 7 more hours until morning. The gala arrived the way important nights always do, faster than expected and heavier than remembered. By 6 o'clock the estate was transformed. 240 place settings, each with the cardboard template napkin folds she had taught the staff. Peonies at every table. The wine service staged and ready, the first pour scheduled for 7:10 so that by 7:15 every guest would have a glass and the room would feel generous. The Duke stood in the center of the upper hall at 6:30, reviewing the space. He was in his evening coat, dark and well-fitted, and he carried himself the way certain men carry themselves when they have never once in their lives had to think about whether they belonged somewhere. He looked at the room and nodded once. "This is well done," he said. Mr. Price, standing nearby, nodded and said he would pass the compliment to the staff. The Duke said nothing further. He moved toward the entrance to greet his first guests. Ilara, standing at the far edge of the hall with a clipboard she no longer needed, noted the compliment and wrote nothing down. By 8 o'clock the gala was in full movement, 240 people arranged across the ground floor of Ashgrove, laughter and string music layered over the clink of glasses, the air warm with candle heat and the particular self-congratulatory energy of people who have decided to be generous for one evening and feel good about it. Ilara was not in the room. She had slipped out at 7:55, taking the east corridor to the staff changing room. The room was empty. She changed without hurrying. The gown settled around her the way things settle when they are returning to their correct position. She pinned her hair back, not elaborately, just back, the way you clear a table before placing something worth looking at on it. Last, the tiara. She set it on her head and looked in the mirror for exactly as long as was necessary. Then she picked up her small evening bag, walked down the east corridor, and entered the gala through the formal entrance. The one guests used. The room did not stop. Rooms rarely stop for single people. But it changed, a shift in the atmosphere, the way a room changes temperature when a window is opened, not dramatic, but felt by anyone paying attention. She felt it. Countess Helene saw her first. Ilara watched it happen from across the room, her mother's cousin, mid-sentence with a man in a red cummerbund, going absolutely still. Not with shock, exactly. With recognition. The kind that takes a moment to organize itself because it has not been expected. Helene recovered. Looked away. Said something to the man in the cummerbund. Looked back. Ilara moved through the room. She accepted a glass of wine from a passing tray. She spoke briefly to two men she recognized from the guest list, one a magistrate, one a landowner, and both of them were too well trained to show that they were searching her face for context they hadn't been given. The Duke saw her last. He was speaking with Lord Cavell. Ilara noted this with the calm satisfaction of someone whose plan is proceeding correctly, and his back was partly toward the room. She did not go toward him. She simply existed in the room at the correct distance, and eventually, as people turn in the direction of things they have not yet named, he turned. He stopped speaking. Lord Cavell, accustomed to filling silences, filled it. The Duke was not listening. His eyes had settled on her with the particular, careful attention of a man who is revising something he thought he understood. He was working it out, the gown, the tiara, the name that someone, somewhere nearby, had apparently just said aloud, because she watched him hear it. Watched it land. He walked across the room. It was not a quick walk. It was the walk of someone who has just realized they owe something and is not yet sure how to deliver it. His pace was steady and his face was composed, but his eyes were doing something that his face had not caught up to yet. He stopped in front of her. Miss Voss, he said. Her full name. Both words, placed carefully, like he was testing whether they fit in his mouth. She looked at him the same way she had looked at him every other time they had been in the same room, with the same amount of expression, which was enough to be polite and not enough to be readable. Your Grace, she said. A pause. The wine service started promptly. He looked at her. She looked at him. Around them the gala moved and laughed and clinked. Then she moved past him, gently, without touching him, and continued across the room. Lord Cavell raised an eyebrow when the Duke returned to his side. The Duke picked up his glass. Drank. Said nothing. Cavell, who was a perceptive man when he chose to be, decided not to ask. The rest of the gala passed the way parties pass when the most important thing has already happened, a little slower, a little less sharp, everyone performing their roles while the real event sits in the middle of the room like a stone dropped in still water, spreading in rings too slow to see but too consistent to stop. At 11:30, Ilara said good evening to the two guests she had spoken with, thanked the wine service coordinator quietly and specifically, and walked back through the east corridor to the changing room. She hung the gown. Replaced the tiara in its velvet pouch. Changed back into her clothes. Picked up her clipboard, which she had left on the staff table, and went to check the linen situation. The long tables in the dining hall were being cleared. 38 tablecloths. She counted as they were folded. All present. She was on her second count when she heard him in the doorway. She did not turn around. How long, the Duke said, did you intend to continue? She kept counting. 35. 36. 37. Until the Voss estate cleared probate, she said. 3 more weeks, approximately. The room was quiet. The rest of the estate hummed distantly with the end of the gala, carriages, farewells, the scrape of chairs. You chose this house, he said. Deliberately. Yes. Because of Cavell. Yes. She turned around on 38. He was standing in the doorway in his evening coat, his hands in his pockets, looking at her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. It was not embarrassment, exactly. It was closer to the look of a man who has just read the final page of a book he thought he had already understood. "I owe you an apology," he said. She waited. "I didn't," he stopped. Reconsidered. "I treated you as though you were part of the furniture. You treated me as what I presented myself as," she said. "That is not an apology you owe me." He looked at her steadily. "What is it, then?" She picked up the case from beside the linen shelf. Considered the question in the way she considered most questions, not rushing, not performing thoughtfulness, but actually thinking. "Information," she said finally. "That's all. Now you have it." She walked toward the doorway. He moved slightly to make room, just slightly, the way a wall shifts when it has been asked to become a door. She stopped beside him. Not far away. Close enough that the conversation could continue or could end, both options equal. "For what it's worth," she said, looking not at him but at the long cleared table and its 38 correctly folded cloths, "this is a well-run house. Whoever you hire after me will inherit something in good order." She left through the east corridor. He stood in the doorway to the linen room for a long time. The house was quiet. The guests were gone. The candles were being extinguished one by one throughout the halls, and the light was retreating the way it always does, from the outer rooms first, working its way inward. The peonies on the long tables had been cleared, but one small vase remained on the sideboard. Pale at the center, deepening to cream at the edges. He looked at it for a moment. He had not known, until tonight, where peonies like that came from. He knew now. He turned off the light in the linen room. Walked back through the east wing. He passed the third-floor landing where the flowers were always fresh, where they had always been fresh, where he had walked past them every day for 41 days without once asking who put them there. He stopped on the landing. He stood very still in the way a man stands when something is rearranging itself inside him and he has the sense to let it. Then he went to his desk. He placed the fountain pen, already set exactly where it should be, exactly as it always was, to one side. He found a clean sheet of paper. He thought for a long time about what a man writes when an apology is not what is owed but something more accurate is not yet clear. He wrote 3 words, crossed them out, and wrote nothing else. 3 weeks. Probate. The Voss estate. He had time. Whether that mattered, whether it would come to anything, whether she would permit it to, he did not know. But for the first time in 41 days, he wanted to know her answer. And that, for now, was the beginning of something.